Okay, hello again. Come back. Welcome back to my channel. And today, actually, what I want to do, I want to talk to my ideas. I think it's just this idea of how I can manage this. It's just like this out of whim. Actually, it's out of whim where I talk to the camera again. Had this insane, it's not insane actually, it's very much embedded idea that, well, we're talking to a ghost. So what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean to talk to a ghost? Well, basically, in our society here, can't, I can't talk. Can't talk. Can't talk. I have to realize that I can't talk. As much as I want. I think, you know, one of the best people or whatever knows that about people, that it's quite interesting how there's some people, they're quite, what's the right term, right? They're crazy in some way. But they mean crazy because the crazy thing is not, if you think someone's crazy, it's quite interesting and how it's contradict to each other in some ways, because the thing about crazy is not crazy, right? So the thing about it is the fact that it wasn't wasn't right to talk this in this moment. For example, like, well, I'm against the world. That's the best way I can talk to. I'm against the world in some ways, but it's not really about against the world. It's against the nature of the world. Well, how about nature of the world itself embedded in yourself in some ways that you could help them in ways that the best way that you could, right? So that's the thing about nature and culture. In some ways, it's the idea that you can't even talk about, and it's, I think, talking and writing and speaking. Well, talk, simply speaking, talk, writing, and things, and well, and reading. Well, it's quite use the same brain in some ways, and it's quite magical how we can use our brain in the ways of how we think. All right, and the thing about it, it's the fact that I'm no stranger to the camera anymore, and it's quite interesting how you see that. I see myself. I, well, I could. It's like I can't even imagine how people just like, not strange to look at yourself at the camera, and it's quite interesting how it was and how it is, because the thing, it's narcissistic. It's narcissistic and it's quite embedded in nature in some ways, because the thing about nature, it grows and, well, It's not nature actually. It's I'm sorry. It's the other way around. It's quite interesting about life is the fact that it wasn't straight to your brain in some ways, but it's straight to your heart in some ways. Well, what is it? What does it mean? Well, it means that you don't even pay attention to what's in front of you. That's the thing. You see yourself there, looking at yourself, and you don't feel like you are yourself. Why? What do you mean that by that? Because the thing is, when people look at themselves in some ways, they don't even like look at themselves, they look the reflections of themselves. So it is interesting how the world played out in this way of thinking, because the thing about it, it's we are the reflections of the world, which is we see the world, right? But now we don't see the world, we see ourselves in some way. So what's that? What is that? So we have this, I think in our generations in some ways we face this fact in some way. Well, this not fact. Well, we face these circumstances where which we are just facing a great psychological problem, I think. In probably in 20 years in some ways, or 10 years probably, we will face psychological problem. But it's not really a psychological problem. Instead, it was just this misinterpretations. Well, not misinterpretations, but misleading informations in some way. What does it mean, misleading informations? In some ways we don't have that psychological notions in some way, or psychological truths in some way of our behavior and of our way of looking at yourself, basically. Because the thing about looking at yourself, it's 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 not even toxic, but it's just not you, it's your reflection. God's sake, it's your reflections of yourself. So what does it mean, your reflections of yourself? Well, now you see YouTube, right? You see YouTube where it's just like, can't imagine to believe, to look at yourself. I think YouTube is the future. Well, YouTube can be a future of how we earn our knowledge. We earn our knowledge. School is not really important anymore, because the thing about school is they don't teach us. Well, they are not smart enough to teach us about the future, because the thing about future is very important for young kids, because they have something greater ahead. And it's unbelievably amazing how you see the world, where it's just like laying out there in some ways. It's not really laying out there, it's just like the structure that you can't even see, that people don't even see. The thing about people, they don't, I'm not saying that they're stupid, they're too smart to be stupid. So what does it mean, they're too smart to be stupid? Where they become their own god, which is, it leads back to my previous video, which is what it's all about. But it's not really what it's all about. The thing about it is the fact that our generations is need change, need need change. What change is it that we have to, at least we have to pursue in some ways? Because the thing is, we're just talking to a ghost. That's the best thing that I could represent, or I could talk to. Because what does it mean, we're talking to a ghost? Well, we're talking to someone that we are not ourselves, but it seems like ourselves. So you project yourself into the world, right? So it's quite interesting how you see that. And who knows, it would like lead you nowhere. I mean, like you're just like part of the game of the bigger structure, right? So what does it mean, part of the game of bigger structure? It means that you are just being played by someone that you aren't doing. So for example, like me now, I can't even like figure out what my thoughts are and just like come out in a way. So what does it mean come out in a way? Because the thing is, probably YouTube is the best way to, to recover a psychological problem in some ways. Because the thing is, it is psychological problem. It is not it is not it's, it's not a thing that you have to thought on in some ways, because the thing about you have to thought on is something that aren't your thought in some ways, because the thing about what you're thought on in some ways, it's embedded in some ways, not yourself. So what is yourself then? That's the question, right? That's the question that probably young people and psychological manner in some ways, that it leads to somewhere, because the thing is, for example, I will give you an example, because I think I talk in a very absurd manner and very conceptual manner, because the thing is, you need, for example, right? For example, you just like watching YouTube, for example, and watch YouTube for like, I don't know, you're on a train and it's become your daily routine, and somewhat you're just like being just like internet matter, and it's just like mad, man. You become mad in some ways to study that, in some ways to recover that, to dig deep that in some ways, but it's not really dig deep that, but it's about it's about probably it's funny, because the thing is, people don't like to be caught on to something that they don't even they don't even have the knowledge on, which is very much interesting, because the thing about knowledge, it's come from where, man? It comes from outside, right? It's from culture. Some it's from, well, your fire is your knowledge, if you might say, in a symbolic manner in some ways, but it's not really about symbolic manner now, because the thing is, we have now a very variant family, which is very much different structure family in some ways. And I think I want to bring out the thing that, right, I love, I forgot actually the movie Quiet Place. All right, I love Quiet Place, because the thing is, it's a horror about family. Well, what does it mean about family? Well, probably John Krasinski don't even know itself, but I think I'd interpret it in some ways. It's just like these reflections of self, which is interesting, because the thing about culture now, they have kind of like this mix and match, kind of like horror like society. What does it mean, horror like society? Because it's quite bad. It's totally absurd, right? But the thing about it, it's the fact that was just this invention, right? See, so the Quiet Place have invented like this monster, outside of their house, which is very much absurd, right? The monster itself is absurd. It's quite big, and it's not really, it's kind of like horror. Like, what is horror? Basically, it's absurd things. So what does it mean by that? It's actually, it's monster. It's absurd thing, because we don't see monster, right? We don't see monster as a human being. the best way to explain to human, right? But the thing is, it's there, man. It's there. You have to see it. It's there in some ways. But what it means, it's there. It's not a physical thing. It's not a physical thing. It's quite mental. So what does it mean? It's mental. Some ways it's something that you don't know yet. Something that you don't know yet. Something unknown in some ways. Because we now, well, probably we're moving towards like this age of something new, which is very much unknown, still unknown to me, which is, I think I know why, because I think it's embedded in free will, which is, I continued on last video, which is free will is this democratic society, right? Democratic society, which is very much support on free will, right? So what does it mean by free will in some ways? Well, free will, it's just like this chaos thingy that you have to fought on. So what does it mean fought on? Is I'm talking it in terms of individual itself. It's not really about the society. So what does it mean? It's you have to fight it yourself with that free will to have indeed to reach a higher level of consciousness, which is very much weird because what's it's not, yeah. First thing first, you have, of course it's weird because it's novelty kind of segment. It's just like you see the reflections of somewhat about the world nowadays. It's about this moment, but what's this moment now? It's not really moment, right? It's really absurd idea because now in the moment it's not about you in the moment, but it's also about someone that you love in the moment. It's about that people that are unknown in the moment, but we just reach there into somewhat kind of like inner circle in some way. We reach, well, you most people reach that into like this inner circle in some ways, but it's not, it's bigger than that in some, it's bigger than inner circle itself. It's outside of it, it's unknown. So what does unknown means? It's very much variance, it's very much variance, and it's quite interesting how you see it, because the thing is, if you want to achieve something, well, if you want to be happy at least, well, you have to be, you have to find yourself in some ways. I might say that, you have to find yourself. So how to find yourself? It's quite interesting because the thing is, we have this kind of like, what would I say? But it's this method of seeing things is quite blinded by your perception. So what is perceptions is very much your 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 if it's all right. For example, if it's a camera, it's your filter in some ways. It's your filter. So we're just like looking at things that way. We trained that way. For God's sake, we trained that way. But it's not the point, and it's not really the thing that we have to train on. It's quite interesting because the thing is, I might say I'm quite thinker myself because I always think. I never stop thinking, which is very much what I would like to do. And I was like just like this kind of like kind of like going back and forth when I was like downstairs at my, thinking about something that are even exist. So what does it mean? It's not even, it's not exist in some ways. It's just like probably it's a it's a, but I'm sure it's not illusion, because the thing is, it's somewhat, I already done the thing that we are self. So what does it mean by self? So it's, I think I found myself. I'm quite, well, it's, well, somewhat now in this Indonesian culture, which is I'm from Indonesia probably. Uh, for most of you, you don't know. It's not probably. I'm from Indonesia, but I don't think myself as Indonesian person because thing is, I'm actually very much a citizen. Oh well, I'm very much a student of the world because I learn from anything. I learn from anywhere, anything, and I don't mean to be biased in somewhat, but it's not really biased because the thing is, I don't want to be biased, but I think we have to be biased in some ways because I'm not teaching you to be like me in this. That's the thing, man. It's actually the opposite of it. I'm teaching you to be like not me, which is, but it's quite impossible because the thing is, if you want to be succeed, you have to translucent yourself in some way to the well nowadays I think in modern society I think you have if you want to succeed in life and be happy in life you have to look at that in the other way around, right? So you have to look at that the other way around. What does it mean? It means like you have to look at in terms of how you see things clearly as it might be, or all right. So it's what does it mean? It means that you have to see yourself based on the truth of everyone's eyes. So that's the thing that we lived on. But what is everyone's eyes? It's quite it's quite mystic in some way and it's quite horrific in some way, but it's not really. It's not. Think about life. It's I don't know. I feel like myself. It's I'm not trying to be like this kind of like way of confronting things, but it's really I need to confront things to the world in some ways that it is our challenge in some way. It is our not our actually. It is your challenge. Okay, don't think about our because R is very much made by individuals, and individuals itself makes you. So you are parts of the individuals itself. So that's really interesting about it because you are the detail of bigger picture, right? Well, which is very much it's embedded in somewhat idea of nihilistic, but it's not really nihilistic because the thing about it is makes you think that you are so small in some ways. Well, at least it worked for me to think that you are so small and you just like how you want to go big in some way. You want to be big some way. You want to contribute to the world more. What does it mean contribute to the world more in some ways? Because think about contributing to the world itself. It's because what about contributing to the world itself? It hurts. It hurts like hell. No pain, no gain. And now it's are you ready to pursue that pain? So it's not really pain about like working anymore because we don't really work like 9 to 5 anymore, which is very much interesting, but we work less probably because the thing is we are on democratic society. I think we well it's not all well majority is still working on 9 to 5, but I think probably in the future it will be like this ideas of working less because I think it's embedded. I forgot the philosopher itself, but it's this man who just like think that it was good idea in some ways, not good ideas, but it's quite interesting how we just like this thing of reflection, because the thing about reflection itself, it's quite interesting because the reflections of your mutual self, well, because you think you see yourself in camera, yeah, and you see people in your this laptop screen, because the thing is it's quite like a mirror, right? Well, yeah, of course it's quite like a mirror because it's really about that shining object, right? Well, it's not really shining object, it's about reflections, and it's interesting how this world might be like in ways of communicating things and what it meant in some way, because the thing is about the world itself, it's, I might say, it's not really bad, it's not really bad, but I mean, like, your view of something, it's really important, I think. Your view of something, what does it mean something, it's quite important. For example, like now I talk to a camera and I look at myself and I was like, this man, just like, I don't know this man. It's quite interesting, right? Because the thing is, it's you, but it's like it's not you, but it's you. Well, what does it mean by that? Well, that means like we don't know ourselves. So what is ourself? That if you don't know yourself, well, for men, actually, you have to do that in terms of looking things. In some ways, don't look for yourself. You just kind of like do yourself in some ways. Well, which is interesting because the thing about it is, what's the secret of seeing things in some way to to clear your thoughts in some ways and to make yourself more calm and more happy in some ways, because the thing is, you have to, all right, for a start, you have to build on routine. That's the first thing that you should do. Build on routine, so you know what it meant by surviving in this life, digital world of new age sounds. Because the thing about new age thinker, right? Well, I mean say that, but it's not really new age thinker, but it's just about this notions of things, and there's like, how would I say this, but it's quite weird. I have this like this nature of things, and it's always stuck in my mind. I don't know if it's real or not. So that's the thing about it, right? Is it a dream or is it not? It's quite blurry nowadays, people. Because the thing about people is they switch perceptions. Because if I look at there, somewhat, I see things differently when I look at there. I look at there is different from when I look at something else. So what does it mean? Probably it means that your perception knows more than you. So what does it mean? We can be blinded by our own eyes. So what does it mean for society? I think